Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, we are kicking off a new series all about the realities of running and managing a Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations implementation project with a focus on companies that are upgrading or migrating from Dynamics AX. To make the series work, we are talking with Peter Jekyll, founder of consulting firm Turn On Dynamics. Peter's a veteran ERP consultant, and he has worked with AX for many years. His projects are now all about getting clients to finance and operations. And as you'll hear in this first episode, those projects are different from ERP projects of the past for a range of reasons. So, in this episode, Peter and I kick things off by explaining why we're putting this series together, and then we run through the themes we'll be looking at in more detail in future episodes. All right. Hey, Peter Jekyll, welcome back to the MSDW podcast.
Jason, good day to you, sir.
Glad to have you here, and I really liked some of the things you had in mind for joining us again. And what we're actually doing here today is kind of kicking off a series of podcast episodes, all based on one theme and different elements of it, which I think is going to be a lot of fun and pretty interesting for our listeners. We're going to be pairing it with some articles as well. So let's maybe we start by Episode 1, we'll do a little bit of background on what this is going to be all about and why. So I'll just kick things off. So you mentioned to me that that in your business at Turn On Dynamics, you're talking to a lot of your clients about AX to Dynamics 365, Finance and Operations, upgrades and or migrations. There's a lot of that kind of work going on right now, you said, and it has it's been educational for you.
Yeah, it sure has been. It seems like this feels completely different than being in the ERP software space for over 30 years now. You're always doing upgrades, right? And this feels completely different. There's lots of conversation, there's lots of discussion, there's a lot of intrigue around direction and so it has a completely different feel to it, and I just found that really interesting. And so, like you said, been talking to a lot of prospects, a lot of customers, and engaged in several of these projects. And the stuff that I'm learning, I thought was pretty fascinating, and I thought I'd perhaps share.
Well, let's break down a few of the key elements of what is unique here, and I'll start with a couple that come to my mind. So the first one is, I think sort of the timing and urgency with AX versions of sort of, I guess, the traditional AX 2012, even 2009, very quickly running out of runway for support from Microsoft. Companies are thinking about how to move up to finance and operations, right? Can you talk a little bit more about the timeline and how much that's impacting things?
So interestingly enough, I think that is actually one of the items that people mention in passing, because I think the hardcore AX community, both on the customer side and on the the consulting side, when we take a look at this, I think there is going to be a large number of folks that are never going to move to the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. Or they're going to take such a long time to do it that whatever kind of timelines that Microsoft goes out there and publishes, as far as you're going to have to move up here by this and this time, that I think that's more of a wishful thinking. We'd love to have everybody up here in the cloud because that's our business model, and we want that gym membership paid off on a monthly basis because that's how that's where Microsoft has gone. But I just, just because that's their business model, I think it's still not it's not automatic for folks. And it's something where I have spoken to lots of folks that said, you know what, we're going to stay here, and they're going to move that time frame out, and we don't feel any pressure because of those dates.
All right. There are certainly other things that make it unique, right? What are a couple of others that we'll be diving into in future episodes?
And when you think about what you're mentioning here is that one of the reasons I thought about you and I having these conversations and doing a little bit of these updates is when you read about this stuff, you're getting Microsoft releases, you're getting very very active folks in the Microsoft community doing, their kinds of almost marketing blogs touting how this is the greatest thing ever, and you got to move up here in the cloud, and and it's fantastic. And then you get that kind of counterbalanced by the blogs that are very technical in nature and talking bits and bytes on how this works, right? How you go from point A to Z. And I don't see a lot of stuff in the middle there where you're not that technical in the weeds guy, but you're not the marketing guy either. You're just kind of sitting back and absorbing all this information from coming at you from real life experience and what's actually happening. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, that's actually right up our alley. So that's why I was really excited to kick this off as well. A couple of things I've observed and heard recently is the volume of customers is picking up who are moving to finance and operations in the cloud. That is putting new demands on Microsoft that I think they've never had before, as a a cloud ERP vendor now in 100% commitment for the future, and that's also putting new demands on the customers who choose to go that route as opposed to the on-premises route, or as opposed to any sort of hybrid route. Another question that we will dive into, and one that you've had some experience with now, with various companies trying to make those types of decisions, and then learning what the outcome of their decisions is.
Yeah, and if you have heard, I think the actual numbers of people moving has been kind of a closely kept secret, right? And there's kind of it's not very open because I'm not. I think they want to make that look like it's more than it actually is, and probably they want to tout bigger bigger companies moving bigger implementations to the cloud than actually have. But just like anything else here, you've got that early adopter. You've got those early adopter issues where not everything's fully baked, right? And things are moving, and there's been dramatic moves not only to the the cloud offering, but also to the on-premise version, for that D365. And I think there are, obviously a lot of people sitting out there waiting for things to shake out, because I think the more you understand about what's actually happening is that this is not straightforward and easy and a walk in the park, right? Just, now it's on our desktop, we've gotten rid of everything. So yeah, I think as, things get smoother, I could see, it would be natural that the speed of adoption increases.
Yeah, I think from stats that we have seen in the last year, hundreds of companies at least are live on finance and operations, but even more have selected it and are in the midst of implementing it. Many more, I think, and so that's really maybe the group that are sort of the most consequential right now, getting those companies live and successful. And it sounds like those are, well, some of them are your clients right now.
And I will say this, I would much rather be a fresh install where I've just decided to, buy the Dynamics product and I am, implementing it fresh as opposed to doing an upgrade.
And that's another one of the topics I think we'll touch on is, the idea of what is reasonable in an upgrade / migration, in terms of cost, in terms of scope of the project, and maybe some of those reality checks, right?
Yeah, not only that, but interestingly enough, one of the things I think we can get into deeper in an entire discussion at one point is there are literally companies where the discussions with them are, do we upgrade or do we re-implement?
Mm-hmm.
And there are literally discussions we've had with companies where we've said, look, we're going to re-implement. And the management team is going to think we're doing an upgrade because that's what they want to hear. It's a very interesting scenario, right?
Sure.
The management thinks, oh, yeah, we're doing an upgrade. Technically, not really. We're actually re-implementing. But so kind of interesting, some interesting scenarios that I've never seen before. Like we talked about at the start.
Yeah, it almost gets into the philosophical realm at that point. Who has to believe what about the money that's being spent with these ERP consultants and the output and the outcome of it, right?
Yeah, those evil ERP consultants.
I wouldn't trust them any further than I can throw them.
And people don't.
Cool. Well, I am. Are there any other angles to this? I think we're going to talk. We're going to touch on project management as well and project management styles.
I think we got a whole bunch of project management stuff in the next episode, right? Or
one of them coming up. We have to. I think we have to take the next few episodes, put them into an order, and then really dig into each one. But I think what we're going to do for anyone listening is we're going to have sort of an accompanying article, a short article at least, kind of supporting the podcast, so that it gives a little bit of context for people who prefer to maybe read before they listen, or listen before they read. We kind of let either one work, I suppose. And I think we're looking at least 3-4 more episodes here. And one of the nice things is we can kind of do them as they go along. I'm also interested to hear some of the real sort of anecdotes and stories of what you've been up to, day to day, working with some of these customers, because this is an ongoing effort for your team and for your clients, right?
It is, and the I've never worked so hard on an upgrade in my life, right? I'm on on one of these projects. I'm on calls almost every day, listening in on the project update calls and managing expectations and resources. And so it's, like I said, it's a completely different animal than I've ever been experienced with before. And I started thinking as far as the different topics to cover, kind of going chronologically as far as, how things go on one of these projects. But since we're in the midst of some of these actual projects right now, and if something jumps out that's really that's really exciting or crazy to understand, might want to go off topic. And those 4 that you've looked at, that was just the tip of the iceberg of all the thoughts that I've had around this. So you may be busier than you thought.
Yeah, I mean, another one that I could. Well, that's great. No, another one that I'm not sure if we've actually nailed it down yet, but I think we're maybe going to be walking up to it one way or another. Is some of this one version, the transition to one version of finance and operations, and what that's really going to mean for clients, and sort of right just beyond. I mean, that'll start to be important just beyond go live, I would think. Managing through lifecycle services using sort of Microsoft's methodology or tools from lifecycle services to stay in compliance, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and one of the things that everybody is seeing is that in the AX world, things were much more in control of the consultants, the customers, sure. But this cloud business is a completely different world where Microsoft has to button this up very tightly, because if you think about this for a second, in reality today, cloud ERP, the ideal customer is like a 5-user company that doesn't have any integrations. They don't have ISVs. They get in there, they put in their credit card, and they pay that on the monthly basis, right? That customer, very focused, very straightforward, and whether they never use the software or they stop using it at some point, that's your ideal customer. When you get into one of these big enterprise companies that's moving their business into the cloud, and you have ISVs, you have integrations with legacy systems, every day at multiple times there are alarms going off because something is not working correctly. And those alarms, trigger all kinds of excitement at Microsoft. You've got the database guys, you got the security guys, you got the Windows guys, the Azure guys, all over the place, right? And so maintaining a customer base of good-sized enterprise customers on a cloud ERP, that's not an easy business model. So it can't be the wild, wild west where everybody's doing what they want to do. And that's why there's this huge psychological shift from people not only that have had AX, but have implemented and developed and been, ISV partners for AX all these years, because it was this great, wonderful environment that they were used to working in. And that's all changing dramatically. And I think there's a lot of culture shock for people.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, I was just talking to another finance and operations. It was actually a retail customer, and they were talking about they started with POS, and they're planning to roll out more financial management tools. But they, I just recall them saying just off the cuff that performance started pretty slow. I think was the implication, maybe barely usable or usable but not great. And I think over about 6 months, it did improve, and they saw Microsoft sort of make specific changes to behind the scenes in response to their transaction loads and so forth. And it was just an ongoing series of improvements and series of steps that they had to go through, sort of hand in hand with Microsoft directly, with that cloud solution. And I suspect that partners and lots of partners and customers are just going to be learning that same process as they go. And I guess the theory is right that the 1,000th customer is not going to bring nearly as many surprises to the Azure-based system as customers 1 through 500.
Yeah, in my world, the thousands just brings the 1,000th attorney, right? As far as I'm concerned. The 2 points on your 2 points on the story you had. Number one, I have a rule is never work in retail, because retail works on Saturdays and Sundays when you want to be out on the boat.
Yeah, right. They have a huge. This company actually, said that they think they were setting records with Saturday transaction volume.
Right, and you don't want to be taking calls on the boat on Saturday and Sunday because the point of sale system isn't working correctly.
You want to stay that close to shore, right?
Exactly right. And then the second thing is there is an entire industry. There's an entire industry of consultants out there making a pretty fantastic living on doing speed adjustment on these systems and fine tuning them.
From outside of Microsoft?
Oh, yes, sir. And some of the things that, some of the tips and tricks on, fine tuning and, making sure that systems respond accordingly. Some of the most fascinating and interesting stuff that I found out in a long time. But there is and a lot of folks, one of the things that I learned is that a lot of folks are going out and selling tuning of the SQL database and using some pretty standard SQL tuning tools and software things that they've written. But in a lot of cases, that's not where the slowdown is happening. And so the guys that are really sharp at this, they can make huge differences. And it's one of these things that's not a one-time fix. It's a process where in almost every one of these systems, you're going to see degradation over time, and you constantly have to be monitoring against system speed degradation and knowing what to look for and how to fix it. So, it's
I am surprised that there's a role for outside experts like that in a cloud scenario where Microsoft does lock down so much of it.
Some interesting examples with some friends of mine that where Microsoft has pointed customers to them and said, hey, because if you think about this, if you're at Microsoft, Microsoft's a very flat organization, right? And a lot of times that a problem like this, you have to have the best guy from a lot of different areas come together to fix something. Well, that's not often possible for a medium-sized ERP client, right? So if there's a consultant that has figured out all these tips and tricks, of the different areas within the implementation that can be affected, they can be much more effective than even the best guy at Microsoft, because he may not have the breadth, right? So interesting. It's something I learned during one of the more fascinating things that I learned during the implementation.
And I think this theme is going to fit into another episode we have planned, which is that relationship between the business, like line of business owners and the IT or stakeholders, maybe you'd call them, and IT stakeholders in a company that is deploying a finance and operations solution, because there's a lot of changes to that relationship, and maybe bringing, whether it's bringing in outside experts or getting your internal teams knowledgeable on the technology that does go into it.
Jason, in my lifetime, we have undergone, and it happened without me realizing it until one day I looked up and said, "Oh my God, this entire thing is flipped on its head." When I started out in the ERP space, right, and like I said, this is the only job I've had my entire work career, is 100% of the time the business drove the selection, the implementation, all the components of an ERP software implementation. It was the business, because this ERP software supports the business. And guess what else supported the business? The IT department. Back in the day, the IT department was around because somebody in the business said, "Hey, can you get me a bigger monitor? And when it comes in, would you please install it for me," right? That was the IT function. Now, the underlying technology on all of these systems has become so complex, so convoluted, right? There are so many moving parts that from the marketing side, everything, every release, it's more beautiful and it's fantastic and it's easier to install, on and on and on. But behind the scenes, the technology and the requirements from a technical standpoint and the dollar standpoint to keep the stuff up and running, almost every project that I work on now, the business cowers in fear of what the IT department is going to allow them to do. It is completely flipped on its head. The IT department now, the IT guys, they do a lot of the selection process. They drive these projects. And interestingly enough, when I talk to a lot of these guys, it's not really what they're interested in doing. But because of the complexity of this stuff, it's ended up on their laptop, on their laps.
Interesting. Well, yeah, we'll have to break that down a little further then. I don't know, any other themes that we have coming up here that we haven't yet touched on? Because this was meant to be a 10-minute sort of very quick overview of what we're going to be getting into, but no, I'm really looking forward to it. It's I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. I can tell you've been at this with some intensity, with some customers and with Microsoft. So I think the timing is great for it.
Yeah, living the dream, baby, here, right?
That's
every
right.
day. And it's interesting that, the more we're going back and forth, the more I remember of stuff like, oh yeah, oh my God, I can't remember. I can't believe I forgot about that. So,
all right, well, don't write it down for me so you don't forget. We'll tack on some extra episodes.
I'm writing.
All right. Well, why don't we end it there for now? We'll be back soon with episodes 2 through however many, and yeah, should be fun.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jason. Always good talking to you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Peter Jekyll for joining me, and I look forward to more episodes in this series. If you have any comments or questions about what you're hearing, please do reach out. My email is jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.